with no responsibility, because there was no, it was run like a post office pretty much. So it means that there's, well, actually it's a bad run because post office here is runs pretty good, but it was like a lowest, really, it's not even anything over here I can compare it to. Because it's really, I mean, nobody gives a flying, red flag about anything. So I remember in the 70, just like in the 76 or 8, I was on a trip to Romania and I drove by Ukraine, which is, Ukraine has the best soil basically on earth. It's very, you can produce a lot of grain. And I was in December, and I saw unharvested grain everywhere, under that foot of snow, because nobody cared. But first, they were not sober, and about. I'm kind of history nut, in especially European history, and the left in Poland and whole Europe, whole Eastern and Central Europe, basically they promised. Because it was World War I when they started in Russia, they promised bread, peace and bread. So it's why they won, pretty much they get the support of the part of the people. And they turn populace, or actually uneducated, because uneducated people, most of the uneducated people, they turn against somebody, because any totalitarian system has to have enemies. It cannot exist with, in peace. It has to have enemy. So first, it was the big millionaire counts or princes, whatever, they're having billions of dollars, for example. They took over, nationalized all this stuff, whatever had factories or lands, and they killed them. Okay, it wasn't obviously enough. Then they went down the ladder, and they did with whoever had anything, they nationalized, took it over, and then they end up with the small farmer was the only person having any so-called means of production, which is tools or soil. So they call, even if you had 10 acres, they call the person like that, they call kulak. They call them kulaks, and they were enemy of the people. So they were harassed. They didn't have any. Actually, they didn't have health care, like working class, quote unquote, had some kind of quote unquote health care, which was aspirin once a week maybe. But even formally peasants didn't have any. So for the yeah, it's so much to talk about. I just have to cut a little bit down. And they left in the Eastern Europe, and the history, ignorance of history makes us repeat it. So it's why it's important to discuss and show the communist what it was. Actually, when you go to the people, it's nothing funny. It's not like a Western imagination of the system. It's like a Disneyland version of it. It's nothing like that. It's the freedom they were giving away is the freedom to abort your own baby. This was one of the first freedoms they gave because it didn't cost them anything. It was a means because there was no birth control provided by state because it was impacted. They just didn't know how to do it. So the abortion was the control of the population pretty much. So, I mean, for example, in the Soviet Union, I read statistics in 70s, every Russian woman had 7 abortions. So, but it doesn't, I mean, I do not know those people because I don't know the exact, but the system which because they took away the God, they took away God, conscience, they confuse everybody because if they kill the God, it's like probably you knew about Yuri Gagarin first flight to the space. It was, I think, like 61 or something. It doesn't really matter because it made me sick. But the first thing Yuri Gagarin said, I'm in space over here and I don't see no God. It was the first thing he said, actually. It means this was the first very important things. If the guy in the first cosmonaut in space, this is what he said. So, and I mean, like I said, obviously I didn't hear, I don't remember when he said it, but it was short after that I really remember that was the argument of the teachers. I said, don't be stupid, Chris. Even Gagarin didn't see God and he went like 200 miles up. I mean, yeah, but it's funny now, but actually, especially for kids, when you're like 10, 12, it's really good, good argument. I mean, how are you going to argue with your teacher? And a lot of kids were very sympathetic to the teacher. They wanted to please him. And I didn't know what to say. So this was, it was like I remember when I heard it, it was like a steak knife in my heart, And it was, and like I said, I was probably, when I heard it, probably 7 years old or so. And going back to the history of Poland, it was the Jewish pogrom, so to speak, quote unquote, in '68. This was the steam release valve, so to speak, and nothing was happening. So 3 years later, in 1971, because it was of economic crisis and basically, it was like a Great Depression has really bad rap in the world, because Great Depression, comparing what was in Poland in 50s, 60s, it was nothing, because still 70% of people in the United States were still employed, or even more than 70, I think. So, I'm not saying it was good, but comparing, I'm trying to picture it as comparing to the Poland in 60s was not piece of cake, because people had no food, no heat, no houses, wait for apartment, which was about